Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Magic Stories. In this video series, I'll be reading to you some of the lore in the Magic universe. I'll be reading to you the story of Crovax Windgrace, one of my favorite characters of all time. Let's begin. Crovax was born on Urborg to the noble Windgrace family. His noble status and the remoteness of Urborg meant that he was largely isolated from the outside world. His only companion was the angel Selenia, who was bound to an artifact to protect the family estate. Over time, Crovax fell in love with the angel, but Selenia was bound by magic and unable to return his affections. When the opportunity arose for Crovax to join the Weatherlight crew, he jumped at the chance to leave Urborg behind and explore Dominaria. He took with him the artifact controlling Selenia so that he could be with her. Crovax assisted with the machinery on Skyship Weatherlight. He befriended Gerard Capuchin, but tended to be aloof and reclusive, making him seem untrustworthy. However, his competence as a crew member was clear, and he remained on board for several years, aiding in the mission to collect the legacy artifacts. Crovax later received word that a pair of unstoppable beasts were ravaging his home. He convinced the Weatherlight crew to go to the aid of his family and found that the Phyrexian agents, Morinfin and Galabrade, had laid waste to his family's lands. The Weatherlight crew arrived too late to stop the slaughter of Crovax's family and soon found themselves locked in battle. In order to win the desperate fight, Crovax summoned Selenia, who defeated the Phyrexians. In the aftermath, Crovax blamed himself for what had happened. His taking of Selenia's amulet had left his family vulnerable to attack. In an attempt to make amends, he chose to remain in Urborg to try to restore his family's heritage. Crovax's love for Selenia became obsessive. Enraged by her inability to return his feelings, he shattered the artifact that bound her in the belief that it prevented her from feeling love. Instead, Selenia was whisked away by a new master. Crovax assumed that she wanted nothing to do with him and became heartbroken. Left with only his family's remains for company, Crovax became more and more unstable. Unbeknownst to him, the act of destroying the artifact had cursed Crovax to a life of misery. He was now destined to destroy all that he loved. Crovax's isolation was interrupted when he was asked to rejoin the Weatherlight crew. He agreed to help, for in his heart, Selenia occasionally called out to him. He pursued the angel out of a strange passion that was part love and part revenge. The crew journeys to Wrath in order to save a kidnapped crew member. On Wrath, Skyship Weatherlight is ambushed by an enemy ship, the Predator. Crovax is traumatized at the sight of Selenia leading the attack against the Weatherlight. The sword that defended his family now slays his allies. He flees below deck, sobbing and howling. Crovax eventually comes to his senses, but by that time it was far too late for him to have an impact on the battle. Embittered by his love's betrayal, Crovax now became obsessed with getting revenge. Skyship Weatherlight survived the attack and headed towards the stronghold where the kidnapped crew members were held captive. Upon arrival, Crovax spots a shapeshifter with the appearance of Selenia. In a fit of rage, he pursued it and tore it apart, much to the shock of his allies. Gerard tried to send Crovax back to the ship, fearing he would jeopardize the mission, but Crovax insisted that he stay. Begrudgingly, Gerard agrees, and he, Crovax, and the crew push forward into the stronghold. Crovax eventually confronted the real Selenia in the dungeons of the stronghold. She tried to kill him, and in the process severely wounded another member of the crew, Miri. Crovax's rage overcame him again, and he wildly swung his blade at the angel, who eventually allowed herself to be struck. She shattered into hundreds of shards that dug into Crovax's flesh and invaded his mind. The curse had been fulfilled. He had killed the love of his life and had been damned because of it. He yelled in agony as fangs pushed their way through his gums. He collapsed and fell into unconsciousness. Crovax and Miri were then taken back to the ship to be treated for their wounds. After some time, Crovax wandered onto the deck and attempted to sabotage the Weatherlight's sails, as he was being commanded to do by the voices in his mind. Before he could complete this, however, he was attacked by Miri, who had followed him out of suspicion. The two fell overboard, where Crovax then proceeded to kill Miri. As the Weatherlight flew away, a shockwave caused Crovax to tumble down a ravine. He welcomed the prospect of death, but the voices in his head had a different fate planned for him. Crovax was taken to Phyrexia, where the voice in his head was revealed to be the Dark Lord Yawgmoth. He was then taught how to consume the life force of others. His body and mind were transformed into those of a Phyrexian. He was granted massively enhanced strength and endurance, glistening oil blood, the ability to manipulate flowstone and to teleport, and had his sense of consciousness removed. Once the completion process was finished, Crovax was taken into the stronghold and his new role was revealed. He was to become the new Evankar of Wrath. His focus was now on the destruction of the Weatherlight and his former friend, Gerard. Gerard is teleported directly into the stronghold. Once there, Crovax fights with Gerard before offering him a chance to join Phyrexia. Crovax promises the resurrection of Gerard's love, showing him the resurrected Selenia as proof. This convinced Gerard to surrender himself to the Dark Lord. With Gerard submitting himself in Phyrexia, Crovax was free to entertain himself with the suffering of others. During a battle against the beast of Yavimaya, Crovax received a distress call. He rushed back to the stronghold with the intent of crushing whatever it was that threatened his throne room. To his shock, he discovered that Gerard had returned from Phyrexia with his freedom, but also with powers from Yawgmoth that had made him a match for Crovax. The two fought to the death, with Crovax briefly having the advantage, but eventually being sliced in half by Gerard. Crovax gives Selenia one last caress before fading away. There is another reality in which Miri killed Selenia and became cursed instead. Following his grief for the loss of both of them, Crovax re-emerged as Crovax Ascendant Hero. In this depiction, he is wearing a plumed cape that is related to the Selenia's wings, and he carries the Sword of the Chosen, which was the sword wielded by Selenia. Thus ends the story of Crovax Windgrace. I'll be uploading more Magic the Gathering lore videos in the future, so be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like to get some updates. Thank you very much.